they were the first to name you to the development squad. Just what were their conversations with you about just what that is and what your role will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think for lack of better terms, it's kind of a red shirt for rookies, and I'm super excited for the opportunity. I'm grateful that they even considered me to be in that position, so I think I'm just taking it one day at a time and really leaning into the process.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So lads, today we're going to be talking a little bit about what we've been hearing around Justine Pissott and everything coming out of Indiana Fever training camp, because honestly, the situation is getting more and more interesting the more details that start to come out. So, first off, the context here. I was listening to Chloe Peterson. Again, I think it was a stream, could have been a live discussion, and she was talking alongside Tony East and also Brian Hanshin, who, along with Scott Agnes, have basically been the main people actually covering what's going on at Fever training camp in real time. These are the guys giving us actual insights, not just box score reactions or surface level takes. And from what they've been saying, there are a few things that really stand out, especially when it comes to Justine Pissott. Now, Pissott is a fascinating player for a lot of reasons, and I think Fever fans are starting to realize that. Why? Because she is 6'4", she plays like a guard, and she can absolutely shoot the hell out of the basketball. That combination alone is rare, like genuinely rare. You just don't find many players with that size who can space the floor at a high level while also having perimeter skills. And when you look at the Indiana Fever roster construction, this becomes even more important. This is a team that has a very weird balance. They've got a ton of guards, ones, twos, combo guards, and then they've got bigs, your 4s and 5s. But what they don't really have are true wings. They don't have those 6'2 to 6'4 players who can slide between the 3 and the 4, defend multiple positions, and stretch the floor. That archetype? It's one of the most valuable in basketball right now, and Pissott fits that mold, at least offensively. Now, here's where things start to get complicated. Despite all of that upside, despite the clear need on the roster for her type of player, the reports are basically saying that the chances of her staying on the Indiana Fever beyond a few weeks are extremely low. And that's not because she's playing badly. If anything, it's kind of the opposite. She's currently on a developmental contract, which is key to understand. That means she's not locked into the main roster, and within a short window, basically around a couple of weeks, other WNBA teams can step in and offer her a standard roster spot if they're willing to open one up. So, right away, you've got a ticking clock situation. Now, what have we actually heard about her performance? Because that's the most important part. From what Chloe Peterson and others have said, they haven't seen a ton of full scrimmages yet. A lot of what's been visible has been defensive drills, defensive schemes, that kind of thing. And in those settings, apparently, Justine Pissott has looked really solid defensively. And that's a big deal, because coming out of college, defense was the biggest question mark with her. At Vanderbilt, she wasn't known as some lockdown defender, she wasn't the quickest laterally, and people questioned whether she could stay in front of WNBA-level athletes. That was the concern. But what's being reported now is that her length, her size, her wingspan is making a real impact. She's being disruptive, she's contesting shots, she's affecting passing lanes, and even if she's not the fastest player on the floor, that length is compensating in a big way, and that changes things. Because if she can be even a passable defender, just average, not a liability, then suddenly you're talking about a 6'4" player who can shoot around 40% from 3 and hold her own defensively. That's not just useful, that's extremely valuable. That's the kind of player every single team in the league is looking for. And this is where the situation starts to look a bit questionable from the Fever side. Because reportedly, the Fever have already decided their final 12-player roster before training camp has even fully played out. That means players like Pissott were never really given a true shot to compete for a spot. They were brought in under developmental deals with the understanding that they're not making the main roster out of camp. And that's unusual. Most teams leave at least 1 or 2 spots open for competition. They let camp play out. They reward performance. But here, it sounds like decisions were made in advance. And if that's the case, then no matter how well Pissott performs, it might not matter. Now, compare that to someone like KK Timpson, and this is where the frustration comes in for a lot of people watching this situation. Because Timpson, from what we've seen, both domestically and overseas, has struggled. There were flashes early on, sure, there was potential. Length, athleticism, shot-blocking instincts, those things are real. But production-wise, consistency-wise, she hasn't shown enough to justify a guaranteed roster spot right now. Yet, she's essentially locked in. Meanwhile, Pissott, who fits a more valuable archetype in today's game, is on the outside looking in, despite reportedly performing well in the areas we're actually getting to see. That disconnect is what's raising eyebrows. Now, let's talk about the market for a player like Pissott, because this is the part that really matters. Players who are 6'3", 6'4", can shoot threes at a high level and have any defensive upside at all are incredibly rare. We're talking about a handful of players globally. And the ones who exist, players like Leonie Fibic, Satu Sabali, Brianna Stewart, they're stars. They're not available. They're not minimum contract players. So if a team sees even a hint of that archetype in a young player like Pissott on a cheap contract, they're going to take a chance. Why wouldn't they? There are 12-plus teams in the WNBA, and almost all of them could use a player like that, especially if the cost is low and the risk is minimal. Because here's the thing, even if a team signs her and it doesn't work out, they can just cut her. There's no long-term downside. So the incentive to take that gamble is extremely high. And that's why the expectation is that if the Fever don't keep her, someone else will pick her up very quickly. Now, add in another layer, injuries. Over the course of a WNBA season, injuries happen. It's inevitable. And when they do, teams look for replacements. Wings who can shoot and have size are always at the top of that list. But according to what's been said, the Fever may not even consider calling up their developmental players in those situations. Instead, they'd rather go to the free agent market and sign a veteran on a minimum deal. If that's true, then Pissott's pathway to playing time in Indiana becomes even more limited. So you've got a player who fits a major positional need, is reportedly performing well defensively, already has a strong offensive skill set, and is on a cheap, flexible contract, and yet she's not in the main rotation plans. That's why people are looking at this and thinking, there's a very real chance she's gone within weeks. And the ironic part? The better she plays, the more likely that becomes, because strong performances just make her more attractive to other teams. So, in a weird way, if you're a Fever fan, you're in the strange position where you want her to succeed, but every positive report increases the chances that another team swoops in and takes her. That's the situation. Now, zooming out a bit, this also raises questions about how the Fever are handling roster construction and player development in general. If you're drafting players and signing them, but not giving them a real opportunity to compete, what's the strategy? What's the long-term plan? Especially when those players might have traits that are highly valuable in the modern game, because wings with size and shooting don't just grow on trees. And if you let one go without fully exploring what she can become, there's always that risk that she develops elsewhere and you end up regretting it. We've seen that happen in basketball before. So yeah, overall, this is a situation to watch very closely over the next few weeks, because based on everything we're hearing, it feels less like a question of whether Justine Pissott can play in the WNBA and more of a question of which team is ultimately going to give her that opportunity. And if the Fever don't, someone else probably will. Tell me what you think. Don't forget like and subscribe. But
They
here,
were
it
first
sounds like
to name you
decisions
to
were
the
made in
development
advance.
squad.
And
Just
if
what
that's
were their
the case,
conversations with
then
you
no
about
matter
just
how
what
well
that is
Pissott
and what you
performs,
think?
it
Yeah,
might not
I mean,
matter.
I think for
Now,
lack of
compare
better
that
terms,
to
it's
someone
kind of
like
redshirt
KK
for
Timpson.
rookies,
And
I'm
this is
super
where the
excited for
frustration comes in
opportunity.
for a lot of people
I'm
watching
grateful
this
that they even
situation.
considered me to be in
Because
that position.
Timpson,
So
from
I
what
think I'm
we've
just taking it
seen,
one day at a time
both
and really leaning into the
domestically
process.
and overseas, has struggled. There were flashes early on, sure, there was potential. Length, athleticism, shot blocking instincts.
I did.
Those things
We had
are
a couple
real.
Zooms with
But
them.
production-wise,
It kind of was just a waiting game and seeing where I was going to go.
She hasn't shown
but again,
enough to
like I
justify
said, I
a
think I'm just
guaranteed
super
roster
excited for this
spot right now.
opportunity and taking
Yet,
it day by
she's
day.
essentially locked in. Meanwhile, Pissott, who fits a more valuable archetype in today's game,
It's been
is on
great.
the
I mean,
outside
it's
looking
very
in,
fast-paced,
despite
like,
reportedly
learning-wise.
performing well in the
I don't
areas
think
we're actually
it's anything
getting
I'm
to
not
see.
used to. I mean, going into
That
college,
disconnect
transitioning
is
and
what's
stuff like
raising
that, I think
eyebrows.
it's just
Now,
super
let's talk
fast-paced,
about the
but I love
market
it.
for
I
a
mean, the
player
girls
like
are super
Pissott.
welcoming, and
Because
everyone
this
is very.
is the part
It's a
that
very
really matters.
family-oriented program.
Players
so
who
I'm
are
super excited.
6'3", 6'4", who can shoot threes at a high
I think
level
it's great.
and
I
have
mean, we
any
both are in a
defensive
competitive
upside at
league,
all
and,
are
I think
incredibly
at the end of the
rare.
day, all three
We're
of us
talking
just
about a
wanna win, so being
handful of
around
players
winners is
globally.
important.
And the ones who exist, players like Leonie Fiebig, Satu Sabali, Brianna Stewart, they're stars. They're not available. They're not minimum contract players. So if a
Honestly,
team
I
sees
don't
even
think
a
so. I
hint
think
of that
more
archetype
they
in a
see me
young
as a
player like
three-point shooter.
Pissott
I think
on a
in
cheap
the past year or
contract,
so is when I've been
they're
able
going
to
to
like
take
get
a
in the
chance.
paint, pretty much.
Why wouldn't they? There are 12 plus teams in the WNBA, and almost all of them could use a player like that, especially if the
I
cost is
think
low
my
and the
development and my
risk is
three-point
minimal.
shot is more mental.
Because here's the thing,
I think when I'm
even if a
not
team
worried about
signs her
making
and
shots
it
is when
doesn't
I
work
make
out,
my shots,
they can just cut her.
and
There's
just
no
like doing other
long-term
things
downside.
to help
So
improve
the
my
incentive
shot.
to take that gamble